Hi everyone. Today, I'm going to introduce a super exciting modern romance novel. The female protagonist, Nora Dolowich. Nora is furious after being neglected by the male protagonist, Xavier, and then shocked to discover he's the alpha of a mysterious family and they share a soul bond. Nora is caught in an emotional whirlpool between the male protagonist's mystery and deep affection, and the impact of her friend's concealment and the truth. How will Nora make her choice? Chapter 34. 3 days had passed since Nora had regained consciousness in the private infirmary of Xavier's sprawling estate. The day following my awakening, I was transferred to a luxurious private room, its centerpiece a grand king-sized bed adorned with plush pillows and silken sheets. The room's most striking feature was an expansive balcony that offered a breathtaking view of the estate's meticulously manicured gardens, a tapestry of vibrant colors and fragrant blooms. No sooner had I settled into my new accommodations than my phone began to buzz incessantly, the screen illuminated with my mother's name. My eyes darted to Ariel, who merely shrugged and gestured towards Bella. When I met Bella's gaze, she flashed me a sheepish, albeit slightly proud, grin. "You told my mom," I exclaimed, my voice a mixture of disbelief and exasperation. I had to. "Nora, you were shot. For God's sake," Bella reasoned, her quick thinking evident in her response. I frowned, biting back a retort. When I finally answered the call, I found myself embroiled in a 2-hour conversation, desperately trying to convince my parents not to cut short their cruise and traverse the globe to see me. I assured them repeatedly that I was absolutely fine and that the police did catch the robber. Bella, in her caring and supportive nature, must have concocted an elaborate cover story when speaking to them earlier, carefully omitting any details that might prompt them to whisk me away and confine me to my childhood bedroom for eternity. My parents had always been fiercely protective, a trait I understood given that I was their only child, conceived after 7 years of trying. However, as I prepared to leave for college, I had a heart with them about the importance of my independence. Their understanding of my decision to move out after college instead of returning to my hometown filled me with immense gratitude. In the years that followed, they embraced their own sense venture, embarking on cruises around the world, finally living the experiences they had postponed during the years I was inseparable from their sides. In the days that followed my conversation with my parents, Ariel and Bella became my constant companions, rarely leaving my side. Some nights, they organized impromptu slumber parties in my room, filling the air with laughter and the sounds of countless romantic comedies. We watched until the romance turned saccharine and the humor became cringe-worthy, all in an effort to distract me from the glaring absence of Xavier. The first 2 nights, his absence gnawed at me. The fact that I had woken up alone, that he hadn't checked on me, left a hollow ache in my chest. But as time wore on, my hurt transmuted into anger. How dare he ignore me at a time like this? My mind raced with 1,000 different ways I could confront him, each scenario more heated than the last. Despite my independent nature and more difficult situations, Xavier's unexplained absence left me feeling vulnerable and conflicted, a stark reminder of the mysterious connection we shared. And another thought that constantly occupied my mind was the fact that even Noah and Elliot were rarely around. None of us girls knew what they were up to or where they were at when they weren't with us. Bella tried to get some answers out of Elliot on the one night she saw him, but his answers were always short and vague. "I saw Seth a night ago." Ariel helped me walk to his room that was just down the hallway from mine. He was in his own bed, his back straightened against the bed frame with his eyes trained on the Star Wars movie playing on TV. When he heard the door closing, his head snapped to our direction and he gave a wide smile. "Hey," he exclaimed cheerfully. "Hey you." I smiled, reaching the bed and plopping down, sighing in relief as the pressure on my thigh was decreased. I turned my attention to Seth, inspecting his wounds, but only a few were visible. A small gash on his lower lip, and a fading bruise on his cheek. "How are you feeling?" His grin widened, Never better. Have you seen my new room? I might fake feeling unwell for just a week longer so I could stay here. Plus they deliver my every meal. I feel like a lazy king up in his own castle. I giggled, shaking my head. Typical Seth. How's your head injury? Are you in any pain? He clicked his tongue. No, it was just a small gash that's nearly entirely healed. But what about you? I heard you got shot. Are you okay? His eyes softened up a bit as he glanced at my injured leg, worry coursing through his vision. Yeah, don't worry about me. I'm all good. I smiled tightly. Dang. He teasingly huffed, his eyes lighting up in amusement. Lucky you. Now you have a badass scar to show off. Telling stories of how you once got shot and survived, but my scar will be covered by my stupid hair. I rolled my eyes, and Ariel smacked him on the arm. You're such an idiot. We all laughed and my heart felt a little lighter. I'm really glad you're okay. Seth, I can't begin to tell you how sorry I... Shh. He interrupted me. Don't ever say that. Nora, don't you ever apologize. This was your fault. I felt my eyes welling up with tears. But it is, I whispered, biting the inside of my cheek. Seth straightened up in his seat, reaching out to grip my hand tightly in his. No, it's not, he said firmly. You were a victim of this mob's rivalry just as much as any of us. So don't you dare blame yourself. I swallowed the lump growing in my throat, and reluctantly nodded even though deep down, I still cowled and helped shake off the guilt gnawing at my chest. When I woke up this morning, I was adamant on getting out of bed alone and leaving my room. I grew so bored of staying in the same place for too long. I stood upright onto wobbly legs and made my way to the bathroom to freshen up. The place was breathtaking and so extravagant, with its marble counters and golden mirrors. I took a quick shower and then dried my hair off with a towel, and while still damp, folded up into a messy bun. We were approaching fall, but the weather was still a bit warm. After I put on a pair of dark jean shorts and a plain white t-shirt, I exited the room and found myself in a familiar hallway, the one covered by hundreds of portraits. I walked past them, feeling an eerie sense travel down my spine as I imagined the eyes, the many characters watching my every step. When I finally reached the staircase, I paused and took a deep breath in preparation to the most challenging part, which was descending the stairs. My injured leg was healing incredibly fast, but there was still a bit of soreness to it whenever I moved it too often or quick. I gripped the staircase rails with sweaty hands and to slowly descend, all the while holding my breath in agony. When I finally reached the ground floor, I heard the chattering of several people and the clanking of spoons on plates coming from the direction of the kitchen, so I made my way towards the noise. As soon as I entered through the door, every motion came to a halt as everyone stopped whatever they were doing and turned to stare at me horridly as if I was the last thing they expected to see. I gulped awkwardly as my eyes traveled about the room, finding 3 pairs of eyes to be trained on me. Luna. Suddenly a voice whispered to my right, and I shifted to look at one of the housekeepers who was in the middle of drying a plate with a piece of cloth. Her hands fell limp to her sides, and she dropped her head in a respectful bow. Oh, I frowned in confusion. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. I chuckled awkwardly. My name's Nora. Xavier's guest. A slight gasp could be heard to my right, and at an impeccable speed. A young girl sitting on the counter stool dropped from her seat and stood on her legs, her head coming down in a soft bow. I stared at her, then did a double take. Why are you doing that? If I was being completely honest, the action chilled me to the core. Are you hungry? Luna, I can prepare you something. A voice spoke from across the counter, which belonged to another woman who stood by the oven with a gray spatula in hand, and a gray apron wrapped around her waist. Why are you calling me that? I narrowed my eyes. I told you my name's Nora. The 3 ladies glanced between each other in confusion. Am the one who should be confused here? Of which a voice exclaimed in my head, Where is Xavier? I asked in hopes of escaping the awkwardness and confusion in the room. The young housekeeper who addressed me earlier replied to my question in his office. None. I nodded once in thanks and abruptly turned to leave through the kitchen door. I limped my way yet once more up the stairs to where I remembered Xavier's office was from last time. When I finally arrived at the wide double doors, my right hand came up in a fist to knock on the door, but I hesitated, my fist coming to an abrupt stop mid-air. My ears strained to hear the muffled voices on the other side of the doors that seemed to belong to a large audience. There was the thumping of several footsteps going back and forth by the door as if someone was strolling past anxiously, with agitated, angry murmurings going off somewhere in the distance. I stepped closer to the doors, my chest nearly coming flat against the wood and my palms sitting on either side as I strained my ears to hear better and held my breath in anticipation. With the update on Becenti, his location, Xavier's strained voice suddenly sounded, and for a second I felt a rush of warm familiarity swarm through my veins. I waited for answer, trying to connect the far off dots in a weak attempt to make sense of what is going on what could be so important to Xavier that he ignored me for days, when instead he should have been by my side, encouraging my recovery. Somebody, tell me something. His loud voice suddenly roared, shaking the doors, and I let out a strangled gasp at the sudden surprise and fear that overtook my body. I stumbled back, in the process tripping over my injured leg and nearly falling to the floor, but on last second I grasped onto the side of the doorframe and steadied myself, holding my breath as I prayed that they didn't hear my scuffling on the other side of it. Alpha, Becenti has sent a direct location. He has eyes on the targets. An unfamiliar voice spoke up in rushed sentences. The scuffling ensued as footsteps began to stomp around the room frantically. I pushed closer against the wooden doors, feeling the rough texture rub against my cheek as my ear fell flat against the surface, straining to hear the muffled voices clearly. You leave Darius for me, Xavier ordered in a strained voice. It felt as if an ice-cold bucket of water was splashed on me. A deep shiver ran down my spine. I held and controlled the involuntary gasp that escaped my lips as I stumbled away from the door, in the process stepping hard on my right leg, and instantly the pain shot up my thigh. I yelped as I lost my balance, collapsing to the floor and clutching my thigh in agony. I couldn't have heard him right. Xavier couldn't be speaking of whom I'm thinking. The voices on the other side of the door came to a halt, and my eyes wide and in fear as I tried to get back on my feet. Footsteps could be heard approaching the door, and suddenly it was yanked open rather roughly. I stared up into a pair of narrowed, steel gray eyes. My heart sunk into my stomach as I was pinned to my spot by the rage-filled gaze. But when Xavier finally realized it was me, his gaze softened. The frown between his eyebrows eased as his eyes inspected my body and posture laying on my back. One hand wrapped around my bandaged thigh. He instantly reached forward, his hands gently wrapping around my upper arms as he tried to help me stand upright, and I damn near melted as the warm spark spread through the spot where his touch met mine. What are you doing out of bed? He questioned in a raspy voice. I grasped onto the rolled-up sleeve of his white dress shirt as I tried to balance myself on one leg, fighting hard to not let my face contort in pain. I looked up at him, about to explain how I'd come to search for him because we needed to speak, but did a double take as I noticed how different he looked at closer inspection. My mouth fell agape in shock and confusion as I found myself staring at his bloodshot eyes, the bags under them running dark as if he hadn't had a proper sleep in weeks. His usually trimmed beard had grown an inch or two, making him look at least 5 years older than his actual age. Nora, you need to be resting in your room," he scolded, and at the same instant bent down to wrap his arms around the back of my legs and lift me up into his arms. I shrieked at the sudden motion, but Xavier secured his grip around my waist and the back of my knees, and when I was positive he wouldn't drop me, I relaxed in his arms. His vision moved to straight ahead as he began to move us towards the direction of the room I was staying in. "Xavier, I need to talk to you." He shook his head. "Not right now," he replied through clenched teeth, his head remaining directed straight ahead. I frowned in annoyance at his reply. "If not now, then when? You don't even come around anymore," I accused, trying to hold back the pain in my voice. His gaze shifted down to glance at me, softening in regret. "Yeah, not when you're awake," he whispered lowly, but I caught on to it given our close proximity. This time, my frown deepened in confusion. What does that mean? His right arm that was curled around my waist shifted as he tried to lower the handle of my bedroom's door. When we were inside, he let out a sigh. I've been working a lot, Nora, but that doesn't mean I haven't been checking up on you. It's just that every time I come around, you'd be sleeping, he explained, his soft eyes meeting mine. His words pulled at my heartstring. I didn't realize he was. When Xavier stopped at my bed, he slowly lowered me down to gently lay me on the plush mattress. I didn't know. He smiled weakly, but it didn't reach his tired eyes. I know. The words I overheard earlier at his office suddenly rushed to the front of my mind, paired with his words from now claiming he'd been working a lot lately, and my eyes widened in fear. What have you been working on? Exactly? Xavier's jaws visibly tightened and clenched, the muscles either side of his cheeks moving up and down. His gaze left mine to stare at the bandaged spot on my right thigh. After a few seconds too long, his eyes eventually found mine. Only now they were harder than steel. I need to go. He prepared to leave, but I jumped forward instantly and reached out for his hand, clutching it tightly. Xavier, please don't. I begged. The fear of losing him as suddenly as he had walked into my life overtook my senses that my eyes began to well up with tears. His eyes searched through my own, narrowing in confusion when he noticed my tear-filled gaze. His other hand came to wrap over my own, clutching his, and he rubbed soothing circles on the back of it. What are you talking about? Nora, please don't go after him. I swallowed a sob threatening to escape. You don't know how he can be. Xavier's jaws clenched tightly, his eyes hardening. And they've been working on luring you in for a long time. This is what they want. Please, don't go. I begged, a few tears escaping the brim of my eyes and slowly rolling down my cheek. His narrowed eyes fell on the spot of the rolling tear, and gently, he raised his hand and with his thumb rubbed the moisture away. His hand cupped my cheek, angling my face upwards so I was staring directly in his eyes. His silver gaze moved between my own, studying my expression before he spoke. They will pay for what they did. He spoke in a low, strained voice. I felt my heart clench at his words as the fear began to gain on me. I opened my mouth to protest, but my words got stuck in my throat as I watched Xavier suddenly lean down, his face inching closer to mine. His lips left a gentle peck on the top of my head, his hand leaving my own. When he straightened up again, I was given a chance to speak before he turned around and started towards the door. No, Xavier, I begged, my eyes widening in terror. Rest, he demanded, his back still facing me as he neared the door. I will see you tonight. I opened my mouth to protest, to beg him to stay by my side and not go off to start something I was sure would end in bloodshed, but Xavier spared me no second glance and was out of the door. In a blink of an eye. Chapter 35. He should have let us fight with him. A familiar voice hissed angrily, making me stop dead in my tracks. Later in the afternoon, after Xavier had left and I was bedridden for a few hours due to my aching thigh, my stomach began to growl loudly, which reminded me that I hadn't eaten anything since last night. I hopped down on one leg and limped my way to the kitchen for a snack, but the voices murmuring and angry conversation between each another from the inside of the kitchen brought me to a stop. I backed up against the wall, my head slightly peeking over the end to glance inside without announcing my arrival. My eyes widened as I came to notice the two people who were having that conversation. He did the right thing. Elliot responded to Noah's earlier exclamation. Noah scoffed. The right thing? We're not a part of his stupid little gang, so he has no right to order us around. He mockingly quoted the word gang. A deep frown was set on his face as he pranced around the kitchen, his hand tightly fisted around a glass of orange juice, knuckles pale white. He did it because he knows that if anything happened to us, Nora would never forgive us and would surely blame herself. Elliot went on. I frowned in confusion, then suddenly felt the heat of my blood boiling in my veins. That's bullshit. This is our decision to make. We're doing it for all of us. Not just Nora. Noah reiterated. Noah, just drop the subject. In your damn tone you might as well announce to the entire house what you're being so salty about. I could see Elliot trolling his eyes as he stepped away from the counter, reaching the sink to set in his empty glass. How can we even trust that hell really and Darius? Noah spat harshly, a deep crease set between his eyebrows. I felt a bile rising in my throat. Are you out of your damn mind? He saved Nora's life. HES practically in love with her. Do you seriously think hell go easy on the man who hurt her? My heart skipped a beat, and I gasped involuntarily as soon as the words left Elliot's lips. I strained my ears to hear better as their voices suddenly came to a stop. There was a slight tap, and when I sneaked a glance behind the wall I found Elliot's hand on Noah's shoulder, giving him a slight pat. Look. Man, I know this isn't easy for you, but she's happy when she's with him. HES helped her break out of her shell, and what more could we ask for than someone who'd make her a priority, while keeping her both safe and happy? Elliot spoke. My heart clenched at his words, and I could practically feel the warmth of his brotherly love engulfing me even from the distance. Noah scoffed. Yeah, he whispered, unconvinced. I stood on the outside of the kitchen, hiding behind a wall, a soft smile grazing my lips as I stared at the floor. It suddenly hit me how creepy I must look to the outside world. Relaxing my features, I straightened my posture and prepared to make my appearance known. And although I was deeply touched by their brotherly affection and kind wishes for me, I cowed and forget the hidden messages in their earlier conversation. They knew that Xavier was after Darius, that he was going to find him and get to him. And not only did they hide that fact from me, but they were even planning on joining Xavier in his fight. That was beyond infuriating to think of. Pushing myself off the wall, I erased the warm smile grazing my lips and the loving look in my eyes and put on a tough exterior. I stalked towards the kitchen and through the open door. As soon as Elliot and Noah noticed my appearance, their eyes snapped to my direction and widened in surprise. Nora, what are you doing down here? Elliot was the first to speak, while Noah straightened up from hunching over the counter and playing with an empty glass. I wanted to grab a snack. I stated dully. Do you want me to make you a sandwich? Noah offered kindly. I bit the inside of my cheek. Do not break your exterior. A voice hissed in my brain. I'd rather not get food poisoning. Thank you very much. I lifted my chin up and scrunched my nose in playful disgust, and I watched as Noah rolled his eyes, breaking into a grin. Yeah, she's good, he said to Elliot while turning around to head towards the sink. Elliot chuckled. I see you're back to your old self. Nothing ever changed. But enough about me. What have you guys been up to? I limped my way towards the fridge, grabbing open one of its doors. I searched inside, and reached out for a bowl of fresh berries. When I shut back the door, I noticed Elliot eyeing Noah suspiciously. Nothing much. We were just grabbing some orange juice. Noah shrugged nonchalantly. I set my bowl on the counter, hopping on the stool and sighing as the weight was taken off my injured leg. Oh, really? I asked, eyeing them skeptically. What about the past 3 days? Why were you guys in hiding? Plotting something? Elliot sighed. All right. Enough. Nora, I know you heard us. I frowned, feigning ignorance as I waited for them to come clean on their own. Heard what? Noah rolled his eyes. Come on, Nora. Eventually I snapped, dropping the single blueberry held between my index and thumb back into its bowl. All right. I did. How could you hide something like that from me? My voice rose an octave as my annoyance pushed through. You were practically bedridden, and we knew you were sure to stop us. You're damn right. I would love. Elliot sighed. This plan was even ours to begin with. Yeah, it was. So take it up with your boyfriend. Noah mumbled. My head snapped to him, a deep frown settling on my features. Elliot beat me to it as he smacked Noah on the back of his head, the loud tap echoing in the quiet of the room. Hey, Noah frowned. Oh, grow up. I glared at Noah. I can't believe you guys. Do you not realize how badly Xavier could get hurt from this? HES facing a literal psycho. Elliot shook his head. Don't worry about Xavier. HES way more powerful than you know. And he has his men by his side. Nothing will go wrong. For us, that is, Noah finished. Wait. His men. Noah rolled his eyes. Well, of course he wasn't going to single-handedly fight off one of the largest mafias in North America. He scoffed. My eyes widened, my jaw loosening and nearly falling to the floor. I gaped at them in horror. How could I not have realized this earlier? What? Elliot frowned in confusion, studying my expression. Darius. They both went silent for a second, their eyes moving to one another. Elliot sighed, slightly nodding. Yeah, we found out HES their right hand. The right hand, as in second in command, as in directly underneath the boss in rank. My mind was in a whirlwind. Suddenly every single piece of the puzzle was magnetically being attracted to the next and giving sense to every loose end. It suddenly made sense to me why he went completely mad that night when he found out I followed him and watched his private dealings. He thought I knew he worked and dealt illegally, and feared that I might rat him out. But of course it didn't do him justice. Nothing ever would. Don't worry about Xavier. Nora. He'll be fine. Elliot assured me softly, which took me by surprise. I snapped out of the haze my thoughts had formed around my mind, my eyes finding Elliot's promising gaze. I forced out a tight smile. I wasn't entirely sure that he would be fine. My anxiety was eating me up from the inside, churning my intestines. I felt like I might throw up. I pushed away the bowl of berries, feeling repulsed by the mere thought of any food entering my mouth. I hope so, I hope so. I whispered a prayer. A short silence overtook us, until Elliot spoke up. I have an idea. His eyes lit up in excitement. How about a movie marathon for a distraction? Noah jumped up from his seat on the stool beside me. Yeah, that sounds great. He turned to me with a wide grin. What do you say? Harry Potter, The Hunger Games. He listed some of my favorite movie franchises. I'm even willing to put up with Twilight if it would serve you. I shook my head, but cowed and hid the smile that grazed my lips. I'll go inform the rest. I'm sure they'll love the distraction. Elliot prepared to leave the kitchen. Yeah, and don't forget to drag Seth away from those Star Wars movies. I've just been watching them for 3 days straight. We can't risk him losing the single brain cell HES got up there. Poor Seth, always the subject of their bullying. I thought to myself while trying hard to hide my smile. But my friends were right. No matter how bad I didn't want to admit it out loud. I needed a distraction. Desperately. If I sat back and get absorbed back into my paranoid thoughts about Xavier and what is going on, it'd go completely mad. Noah's eyes remained on me, watching me expectantly. Reluctantly, I nodded. His lips curved up into a wide grin, and he instantly turned around and started rummaging through the cabinets in the kitchen. Well, wait, please tell me they have popcorn. He mumbled the last part as he continued searching through the pantry and cabinets. The sudden hop I took down from the stool I was seated on made the blood rush down my wounded leg, and I grasped the counter for a couple seconds until the displeasing faded away. "Aha," Noah exclaimed, which made me flinch back in surprise. He shifted around with a look of triumph, a bag of kernels clutched in his fist. I chuckled and shook my head. Well, it'll be down in the living room. Nora, Nora. Wait. No sudden exclamation stopped me in my tracks, and I turned to stare at him expectantly. He set the bag of kernels on the counter, taking various steps forward until he reached me and stopped a mere foot away. His eyes left mine as he stared at the floor, biting the inside of his cheek nervously. What is it? I encouraged. He lifted his head and his eyes found mine, full of unspoken words. I want to talk to you about something, as I kept staring at him expectantly for another few minutes, but found him to only stare back silently. My nerves started to run on overdrive. What is it? What is it? Noah. His jade orbs kept traveling between my eyes, searching between the confusion I felt. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Suddenly, his gaze shifted lower, and before I could make sense of anything that was happening, Noah was leaning in. When I felt his warm breath in my face, my heart leapt out of my chest and my hands came up to push against his shoulders. I gasped as I shoved him away roughly, losing my balance and stumbling against the counter. Nora. His hands traveled to my waist at knees, but I shoved them away. What the hell? I shrieked, stepping away from his touch. My widened and frantic eyes met his, searching for answers to his inexplicable action. He just tried to kiss me. Noah understood the look behind my eyes, and instantly took a step back. His gaze moved to the floor, and his cheeks and neck began to redden up. I am sorry. I just had to what? Noah, I exclaimed, curious. I had to try. You had to know. My eyes widened at his words, my heart sinking to my stomach. He took a step forward, his hands reaching out for mine and grasping them roughly. I stared at him in horror, seeing his eyes frantically moving between my own. An inner voice shouted at me to silence him, not wanting him to go any further with his words. But I cowed it as he began to spill everything in a rushed, desperate tone. I've liked you for so long. Nora, I've waited for you for years. I never wanted to rush you into anything because you always claimed you weren't ready. My eyes widened and throat tightened, as did his grip on my hands. But now you're moving on too fast. You don't even know this guy. He scoffed, his jaw tightening. I'd have to let you know that you have another option. Noah, what the hell are you saying? I exhaled the question in horror I couldn't be hearing correctly. I pulled my hands out of his grip roughly, creating a distance between us as I shook my head. You've seen what he can do. How can you trust someone like him? Noah's voice was rising in volume, and I shrunk back in discomfort. Noah, don't do this. He will hurt you hell. He already has. Look at where HE's gotten us. You can't keep repeating the same mistakes. Nora. His eyes were filled with rage as he stepped forward, coming closer to me. I'm not. Xavier is nothing like Darius. My blood boiled at the mere thought that he could consider such a thing, that he saw a similarity between those two completely different human beings. I shook my head defiantly, my heart racing. I'm not doing this with you. Nora. He reached out to grab my arm, but I shoved his hand away roughly no. I turned around and as quickly as I could muster made my way through the kitchen door to where I remembered the living room with the TV was down a narrow hall. And to the left, I felt nauseated with discomfort, my mind still not fully comprehending that Noah tried to kiss me. His words continued to echo in my ears, and I forcefully shook them out of my head. Surprisingly, when I walked into the living room, I found a group of people already seated over the couches, some I had never seen before. Ariel's attention was diverted from a girl she was speaking to. To me, she smiled widely and gushed me over to take the seat. So I did as told, inhaling deeply to try and regain my composure. Nora, devil witch, Nora, let me introduce you to some of the dopest people I've met while staying here. Ariel began with a wide grin on her face. Scarlett's sat right across from us, and when our gazes met she gave me a bright smile and whispered a greeting, which I returned. That's Jonah. Ariel pointed to a guy with shoulder-length black hair who smiled shyly and waved a hand awkwardly. And that's his twin Sam. Sam looked nothing like her brother instead. She had wavy blonde hair and twinkling green eyes. Luna, it's a real joy to see you doing better. Sam spoke up after Il's introductions. My eyes widened in surprise and confusion. My name is actually Nora. But thank you. I chuckled nervously. She was the first one to call me that name, which really confused me. The girls surprised me even further by laughing back. Yes, I know. I frowned. Then why did you call me that? Ariel shifted in her seat, turning to inspect Sam expectantly as she was just as curious about the answer. Because being our alpha's mate makes you our Luna, she replied with a light smile grazing her pink lips. I stared at her blankly, trying to process her words. I had so many questions I wanted to ask back, but the second I opened my mouth to speak, Bella, Elliot and Seth entered the room, shifting everyone's attention to them. Mate, isn't that like the British version of homie? Seth asked confused as he took a seat beside Sam. I frowned. Well, Jonas snorted out his laughter, covering it up with a cough. Scarlett was giggling at his reaction, and Sam was biting back a smile. Homie? Really? Ariel rolled her eyes. Nora. Belle greeted me with a wide smile, reaching our large couch and taking a seat to my right. I see you've met our newest friends. I smiled and nodded once. As Elliot began to switch on the TV, Ariel grabbed a blanket and everyone began to cozy up in their space. Noah then walked in with 3 large bowls of popcorn, which he gave away with a slight frown, before plopping down on one of the seats. His eyes avoided mine, which I was glad for because just seeing him was making my blood boil. I inhaled deeply and switched my attention to the TV. This was meant to be my distraction from my thoughts, and I will not let Noah take that away from me. All right. As the majority have voted, this shall be a Harry Potter marathon, Elliot announced, rolling his eyes, as if y'all haven't already watched the movies 1,000 times, and would watch them for 1,000 more. Scarlett replied, smiling broadly. I agreed, and she offered me a wink, and so I laid back in my seat as the Harry Potter marathon commenced, blocking all my troubles from entering my mind and rejoicing in the few hours of distraction it'd been offered. Chapter 36. The slight motion as I was carried away from my position on the couch slowly began to pull me away from unconsciousness, and I gradually became aware of my surroundings. The familiar warmth of strong arms wrapped around my body, igniting sparks that shot down every nerve in my being, was the first thing that came to my senses. Then I felt the warmth connecting with my right cheek as I was brought closer to my carrier's chest, and I felt the butterflies erupt in my stomach. Instantly, my eyes shot open, and I found myself glancing upwards into the eyes of the most striking silver. Xavier smoothly carried me in his arms and began to walk away from my position on the living room couch, where I, along with a couple others, had fallen asleep after the 4th Harry Potter movie. My eyes widened as they connected with his, and I saw the small, warm smile curving up his lips. Instantly, my arms shot up and curled around his neck, bringing him to me as I embraced him tightly. The motion took Xavier by surprise, and he let out a low groan as he steadied us so I wouldn't fall to the ground. I squeezed my arms around him tightly, the relief of having him back safe and sound overpowering my senses. He let out a slight chuckle, his hand gently squeezing my waist in reassurance. When I let him go, he pulled back to give me a heart-clenching grin. It's good to see you, too. He carried me away from the living room, smoothly ascending the stairs as if he was carrying my heavy weight in his arms, and headed towards the room I was staying in. All the while, my eyes continued to scan every inch of his body that I was able to view, checking for any possible injuries, but surprisingly, he bore none. The warmth that radiated off his body left me as he gently set me on the bed. Go back to sleep, he ordered softly, but there was no way that I could have fallen back asleep. I sat upright in bed, reaching for his hand just as he began to turn away. No, I pulled him down, directing him to sit in front of me, which he did. What happened? Are you okay? I heard a large group of your men also joined you. Are they all right? How did it go? I rushed as my questions came pouring out. Xavier shook his head. He'll tell you all about it tomorrow. Go to sleep now. He prepared to get up, but I grabbed his hand, clutching it tightly, and yanked him back down. Xavier's eyes widened at the sudden aggressiveness, sitting back down and staring at me bemused lie. No, don't leave, I pleaded. Do you seriously think you'll be able to fall back asleep now? I scoffed. He raised an eyebrow. Well, I guess not. I sighed deeply, my patience fed up. What happened? Xavier rubbed at the slight stubble growing on his chin. inhaling in preparation. We took care of everything. You don't need to ever worry about them again. I frowned, digesting his words. Teeth, they're gone. I carefully chose my words, afraid that a sudden revelation of Xavier having ended someone's life might shock me into silence. Xavier nodded stiffly, his jaws clenched tightly. Tell me how. The request even took me by surprise. His eyes shot up to mine and widened in shock. He raised an eyebrow in questioning. I want to know every detail. I continued, but he instantly began to shake his head in disapproval, a slight frown creasing the skin between his eyebrows. No, Nora. Are you even hearing yourself? He scoffed in disbelief, which in turn had me frowning disapprovingly. I deserve to know how it went. Xavier. I fought back. His eyes snapped back to mine. Now I'm arrowed into dangerous slits. Why? Because he was your ex-boyfriend. The surprise that overtook me because of his unexpected question left me speechless. I stared back silently, my mouth opening to reply to his rude snapping, but unable to form any words. That was the last thing I expected him to say. Xavier sighed deeply, turning to stare at the floor, and his hand came up to run down his face. He cleared his throat awkwardly. I didn't mean it like that. I scoffed. I think you did. He sighed once again, staring daggers ahead of him and clenching his jaws tightly. His nostrils flared as he tried to compose himself before replying. I held and controlled myself when I saw him. He finally revealed. My breath hitched in my throat as I detected the strong emotions behind his revelation. His fists were tightly clenched on his lap as if he was fighting so hard to maintain his composure. When I saw him, all I could hear were Elliot and No's voices as they spoke of what he'd done and what he deserves. His eyes slowly moved my own, hard as steel. Then they dropped down to my lap and settled on my right leg. All I could see was the sight of you lying on the dirt covered in your own blood. My heart began to thrum loudly in my chest. I reached out to grab Xavier's tightened fist, and he went stiff at the sudden motion. Reluctantly, he relaxed his hand muscles and I entwined our fingers, rubbing soothing circles on his bruised, up knuckles with my other hand. It's over with now. He's gone. And so is his superior. I didn't know how to feel about it. On one hand, I knew that he had no other choice but to take them out. They weren't going to stop and everyone in Xavier's life was in danger, so one could say that the action was taken out on self-defense. But on the other hand, I didn't know how I felt about the fact that Xavier was the one who ended Darius's life. An inner voice questioned me. Could I really stay with a man who'd killed another? But I didn't want to dwell on that now, so I jumped into a new topic. Why does everyone keep calling me Luna? I asked. Xavier's eyebrows furrowed in confusion and shock, his eyes suddenly finding my own. What? I nodded. Yeah, everyone keeps calling me that even though they know my name is Nora. He went silent for a moment, the wheels turning in his brain. Then he sighed, shifting in his seat to fully face me. That's because I'm the alpha of the pack, he replied. I frowned, still not fully understanding what that meant. Like a boss. Xavier shook his head slightly, answering, more like a leader. I bit the inside of my cheek as I pondered over his reply, which didn't exactly answer my earlier question. Xavier surprised me by reaching with his other hand to grasp power already entwined ones this time. He was the one gently rubbing circles on the inside of my wrist. There's another thing I haven't told you about myself. He whispered a confession. I frowned, red flags rising in the back of my mind. What is it? He cleared his throat, thinking over his answer before verbally speaking it. We're not as normal as humans are. I gaped at him, unsure of what reaction he expected to receive first. Remembered the story of my ancestors. He continued, to which I reluctantly nodded. After the oath was made, my great-grandfather was doubtful of their abilities to properly protect and given the fact that they were only men with no real advantage on their side, other than their determination and iron loyalty. Xavier's eyes studied mine, before continuing. The elder of all three families then traveled for days to seek the aid of an infamous witch, and she brewed them a potion made of the hearts of the most ferocious breed of pure wolves. A low gasp escaped my lips. It felt like I had gone 20 years back in time. Cuddled up on my bed at night as my parents read me thrilling bedtime stories of the mystic world. The potion affected our elders greatly. The first stage was a physical change. Their eyes turned the brightest shade of silver. Their build grew to twice its normal size, and they could hear the noise of approaching men from all the way across the village. They grew to possess superhuman strength, impeccable speed, and the greatest gift of all was the ability to mentally communicate with their spirit animal, the wolf. My breath hitched in my throat and my eyes widened as soon as the last word left through Xavier's lips. Wolf. The mental image of the wolves in the woods sprung to the front of my mind. The unanswered questions that I had pushed to the back of my mind coming forth. How had Xavier directed the wolves to move past me, so careful as to not cause me any harm, to attack our rivals, the outsiders that witnessed these inhumane powers first hand, could not comprehend how it was possible for our elders to possess them. They tried to make sense of these gifts that only some had been blessed with, and the fear that ignited within their souls had them come up with all sorts of ridiculous stories. Hence how the myth of werewolves came to be. My eyes widened in shock, but Xavier was quick to answer my unspoken questions, which is, of course, nothing but a myth. I have not, nor has any of my pack members, ever shifted from our human forms into a savage animal. He tried to hide back a smile, but I could still see the slight curve of his lip. Additionally, our elders had one request for the witch to include during the making of the potion, and it was that the powers be passed down to their first-born sons, so that their descendant protectors continue fighting for their land with the same powers they possessed. Xavier continued, but to add that request to the equation, the witch had to add a factor that ensures the bloodlines don't reach its end, and a single, lifelong mate for every alpha. My gaze snapped to Xavier's, the word mate bringing back memories of the first time he brought me to his house, and narrated to me his family history. He had called me his soulmate, with a trembling voice. I questioned. Them, me. I watched as Xavier's eyes softened, his lips curving up into a warm smile. I had been waiting for you for as long as I can remember, he whispered, his strikingly silver eyes never leaving my own, igniting warm feelings within my heart that spread through my veins and engulfed me wholly. I opened my mouth to reply, but was at loss for words. As the direct descendant of our elders, I am the alpha of this pack, and as my mate, you are their Luna. But what could I ever offer them? You have their utmost respect and protection. Xavier quickly spoke, as if aware of the personal doubts I was about to voice out loud. And all I ask for is your loyalty and support, to your pack, as well as your mate. This was all too much to handle. I couldn't believe the words he was speaking. Everything felt so surreal. I know that this is all too much. Can you read my mind? Too, I exclaimed. Xavier's eyes widened. No. He shook his head. How are you voicing out whatever I'm thinking? I gasped. He surprised me by letting out a slight chuckle. That would be the mate bond. As your mate, I can feel your emotions and easily guess your thoughts, because our souls are connected in ways that are far beyond any human's comprehension. My hands were getting clam-mire by the minute as they were clutched by Xavier's. My emotions in a whirlwind. Although all of the things he just narrated to me seemed beyond impossible, a small part of me believed him, because nothing made sense since the day I ran into Xavier. Anyway, not the emotions I felt at his presence, nor the chills he sent down my spine every time my eyes connected with his silver ones, nor the bond I felt we had grown in such a short period of time. Maybe, somehow, soulmates did exist, and the most powerful man, in perhaps all the world, happened to be mine. Chapter 37. For the first time in my life, I was awakened by the shots of 1,000 sparks as they traveled down the right side of my body, by the warmth that engulfed my senses and the addictive aroma that I knew only one person to carry. My eyelids fluttered open and I blinked against the morning sun, It took my mind a few seconds to fully comprehend my position on the bed, where I lay half on top of a rising and falling chest. My left arm was draped over Xavier's rest torso as he lay asleep on his back, his own arm around waist. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. I jumped out of my seat, in the process accidentally nudging Xavier roughly, which earned me an annoyed groan. I backed a couple steps away, unaware of the sheets dangled around my ankles, and let out a squeak as I tumbled over the edge of the bed and collided with the floor. Xavier shot out of his place, his eyes wide open as he studied the room, then fell on my awkward position on the floor. I groaned distastefully, both in pain and embarrassment. Xavier let out a slight chuckle, his hand coming up to rub the sleep out of his eyes. "What in the world are you doing?" I shuffled on the floor, trying to untangle my legs from the sheets but failing miserably, and instead looking like a struggling fish flapping out on land. Xavier studied my failed attempts, and just continued chuckling at me. "Help me." I frowned at him, hissing through clenched teeth, bearing an amused grin. He ran his hand through his tangled hair and moved to the side of the bed to stand up. "Yes, Mum." I watched helplessly as he grabbed the end of the sheets and loosened them, twisting them around my ankles to free me. My legs fell with a thump to the floor, and I wasted no more second in jumping out of my seat. I mumbled a quick thanks and rushed to the bathroom where I locked myself in, leaning against the closed door. I let out a deep sigh, tightening my eyes shut as I tried to erase the first 10 minutes of our morning encounter. How embarrassing it was that this was the first thing he had to witness. On our first morning waking up together, I face-palmed myself in shame. Suddenly, the memories of the night before rushed to the front of my mind. I remembered the surreal stories Xavier narrated to me about the history of his family, the superpowers. I shook my head. That's ridiculous. People don't have superpowers. This is real life we're talking about. I moved towards the marbled sink and turned on the faucet, splashing my face with ice-cold water. I gasped as I came to stand up straight, droplets of water rolling and falling onto the top of my shirt. I looked at my reflection, and the most sparkling brown eyes stared back at me. There were stars shimmering in the dullness of my eyes. I stared bewilderedly. Last night, after the talks Xavier and I had, he excused himself to take a bath before bed. I tried to wait up for him but ended up falling into a deep slumber. I don't even remember hearing him leave the bathroom. I must have been way too deep in my sleep, given that I'd spent a whole night asleep next to him and never once realized. It was like this was the first time I'd woken up in the arms of a person I had feelings for, but never before was it in Xavier's. The man who made me feel things I never thought were humanly possible. Your soulmate. I jumped once the word was spoken in my mind, hushing the inner voice in my head. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. "Nora, are you all right?" Xavier's voice came through. Why would Lintai be? I frowned at my reflection, and only then came to the discovery of how fast my heart was beating within the confines of my chest. My palm came to fall flat on my chest, feeling the erratic beating. Am I on the verge of a panic attack? "Nora." Xavier's voice sounded more urgent this time. They could hear the noise of approaching men from all the way across the village. My eyes widened as I recalled his words from last night. He could hear my heartbeat. The door handle started coming down. "I am fine," I finally replied, and it stopped halfway. Xavier removed his grip from the handle. "I'm waiting for you to be done so we could go down together for breakfast," he informed me. I nodded while staring at my reflection, only to then realize he couldn't see me. "Okay," I answered. Or could he? The inner voice questioned my earlier statement, but I shook my head. Stop being ridiculous. I rid of the thoughts running through my mind and backed from the sink, physically shaking the uneasiness away. I inhaled deeply, regaining my composure, and reached for the door. When I unlocked and pulled it open, I came face to face with an anxious Xavier. His posture took me by surprise. He was fumbling with his fingers with a slight, worried frown creasing the skin between his eyebrows. When his eyes met mine, they widened. His nervousness warmed my heart, and I gave him a small smile. "Ready?" I asked casually, breaking the ice. He nodded, stepping away from the door framed to let me pass. We left the bedroom and slowly made our way down the hall and towards the staircase. I was about to take the first step down when Xavier's voice stopped me. "I just want you to know," he started, and I turned to watch him expectantly. "Everyone in the house already considers you their Luna, but I realized that I hadn't given you enough time to fully comprehend all of this. So if it ever gets too much, just let me know and they'll inform them to take it slow." I was very appreciative of his concern and consideration for my comfort, so I smiled and nodded once. We continued our way down the stairs and took the turn to the dining room. When we walked in, we found that a group of people were already occupying the space. Around the long table sat Ariel, Bella, and Noah, while Vince and Scarlett stood by the end of the table. Their eyes suddenly turned to our direction. Yesterday's memories were still fresh in my mind, and I fought hard against frowning at Noah and making it clear to everyone in the room that there was a growing tension between us, so I avoided his eyes at all cost. Vincent moved forward, casting us by while bearing a grin. "Alpha," he nodded at Xavier, then turned to me. "Luna." I felt a slight blush rising to my face because of his cheekiness, while Xavier simply rolled his eyes. "Nora," Ariel exclaimed, jumping from her seat and embracing me. "Did you hear?" Her eyes were lit up with excitement. "Hear what?" I frowned as I took a seat on one of the remaining chairs, reaching out for a piece of buttered toast from off Ariel's plate. "Of course she heard." "Ariel, she's literally surrounded by the heroes." Noah rolled his eyes, sipping from a white mug. I clenched my teeth, biting back my words. Ariel hushed him, then turned back to me. "Everything's finally back to normal." She beamed with excitement. Her words pulled at my heartstrings, and for a second I was overtaken by the same feelings of guilt that I fought so hard to bury. Things should have always remained normal in my friends' lives. This was the second time I had put their lives at risk, and I didn't think I could ever forgive myself for it. I gulped down the growing lump in my throat, forcing on a tight smile. "Why, yeah. And also am moving here. To Indiana." She grinned. My eyes widened, and I nearly choked on the piece of toast in my mouth. "Vampire deception. I dwelt Mason and EY Dwet. As an undocumented changeling and forced to pose as a low-level witch." She nodded excitedly. "Seth is helping me find a place close to the city. I think it's time for a fresh start. An Indian is starting to grow on me." I didn't fail to notice her eyes moving to Xavier as she offered him a knowing smile. I frowned, turning to glance at Xavier, who was bearing a soft smile of his own. "What is going on?" I questioned, suspicious of their odd behavior. Xavier glanced down at me and shrugged innocently, turning away from me and reaching to pour himself some coffee. "Aren't you happy?" Ariel asked me nervously. Frankly, I didn't know how I felt. Of course I stand by whatever choice makes you the happiest. "He'll just miss you. Is all." I whispered the last part. Ariel sighed. "I would miss you. Too horribly." She turned towards her plate and picked up a slice of bacon, biting into it with a faint smile playing on her lips. "But you could always move here with me." My eyes widened, realization suddenly hitting me. My head snapped towards Xavier, who was halfway through raising his cup of coffee to take a sip while staring at me expectantly. My gaze froze, his actions midway. I was at loss for words. I knew for sure he had something to do with it. He probably talked Ariel into moving here so I could follow in her steps, knowing how close of a relationship my best friend and I have. But before I could finish my sentence, Xavier put his mug down and raised his hands in innocence. "I have nothing to do with it." "I highly doubt that." I glared at him accusingly. "It's true. Don't give him credit for my brilliant ideas," Ariel complained. I frowned at her, eyeing her skeptically. "What are you planning?" "Nothing. I'm just craving a fresh start after everything we went through." She shrugged, biting into her bacon. "And it would probably do you good too." Luna. Vincent spoke up. Why the hell do you keep referring to her as Luna? Noah frowned, his annoyance very clear on his face. Vincent glanced at him, then motioned with his head towards Xavier. H.S. our Alpha. Then he looked over at me and winked. Which makes her our Luna. Noah scoffed. How does that make any sense? It's just a nickname. I tried to change the subject without raising suspicion. And where's Elliot? Bella looked up from her plate to answer. H.S. packing our bags. Which reminds me, I should get to it as well. Noah hopped off his chair and started making his way towards the door. Now that it was all safe and back to normal, I forgot that we had to return home. But where exactly is home? An inner voice questioned me. When are you leaving? I asked Bella, as this time I reached for Xavier's mug and snapped it out of his reach, taking a sip from his coffee. Xavier frowned, and Vincent chuckled at his reaction. Around noon. Today, I gasped, to which Bella nodded. Elliot needs to get back for an important meeting, and I have a work submission that's already a week late. She informed me. Ariel got up from her seat and grabbed my hand, yanking me off mine. While they pack up. Let's go check out this place Seth found close to the city. It's a small cozy apartment with the coolest view, but we need to pack. To Ariel. Ariel frowned. Pack what? We'll be returning anyway. We'll just need our passports to go. I shook my head. Things were moving way fast. I wasn't even sure I wanted to move to Indiana. And here was Ariel already hunting for a new place to stay. We can drop you guys off. We're headed to the city to run some errands anyway. Vincent offered, referring to him and Scarlett, who offered me a wide smile and nodded her head. Awesome. Ariel agreed. I frowned as I turned to study her expression. Suddenly, Ariel yanked me by the hand and pulled me towards the door. I stopped her by the living room before she'd get too far. Ariel, wait. She halted in her tracks and turned to look at me expectantly. I glanced behind my shoulder, not sure we were far enough from earshot, and guided her further into the living room. I'm not sure I'm ready to do this, I admitted, voicing out my inner doubts and fears. Ariel studied my nervousness, then reached out to hold both my hands and gently guided us to sit down on one of the couches. She shifted in her seat to fully face me. Listen, babe, I understand your hesitation. Believe me, I do. But if I didn't know it, deep within my heart, that this is the best thing that could happen to you and that it would make you immeasurably happy, I wouldn't be encouraging you to do it. I pondered over her words. We have all witnessed firsthand this unrealistic bond that you two have formed, and it's not something that comes twice in life. Xavier has very deep feelings for you. It's clear in his eyes, and he has proven time and time that he would go to great lengths to keep you happy and safe. You shouldn't let that go. Her words pulled at my heart, strange because I knew them to be true. But taking this step of moving to another state was a huge leap of faith, and I wasn't sure how it would play out. And you won't be alone in bringing yourself to move past the past and start fresh, Seth, and I will be beside you through it all. Ariel promised, a gentle smile playing on her lips. It's time for a fresh start. And God knows you need it more than any of us. I chuckled lightly. She was right. I was in desperate need of a fresh start, and having my best friend beside me will make it a whole lot easier. With the wings of 1,000 butterflies flapping within the confines of my stomach in excitement, and a smile so wide gracing my lips, I nodded in approval to Ariel's plan. I had decided all at once this was a leap of faith I was willing to take. Chapter 38. When we returned back to Xavier's home after our short trip to check out the apartment, every onus mood had shifted incredibly. I was feeling giddy, and Ariel was so excited she was constantly hopping on her feet. Vincent and Scarlett were also happy that we had liked the place, because that meant we would return after our flight. To stay, the apartment truly lived up to its expectations. It was close to the city, and had an entire wall of windows that overlooked the best buildings. Ariel and I had instantly felt at home, and considering it was close to both Set HS and Xavier's places and came at a very affordable price, Ariel was quick to seal the deal with the owner, disregarding my nagging about how we should at least take a few days to think it through. Think what through? She had said. I'm ready to move in. You can take your time to think your life through, and once you do, the place will be ready to move into. Back at Xavier's, we each went to our rooms to pack up the rest of our belongings. I didn't have much that needed to be packed, so I settled for my backpack, only which I carried in some of my travel necessities. I was quick to change into a more comfortable attire as we were nearing our flight time and everyone was already by the door. As I was hurrying down the grand staircase, I balanced my backpack on my arm as I was simultaneously shoving my other arm into the sleeve of a light jacket. When I neared the end, I stumbled over my feet and dropped the bag from my grip, hearing it tumble down the next few steps and fall to the bottom of the steps with a disapproving thud. I hunched over to grab it, but was surprised to see another arm extending towards it at the same time. I've got it. I frowned as I came up straight, staring into No's jade orbs. He lifted the bag up, swinging it over his shoulder and offering me a tight smile. Not that easily, buddy. No, it's fine. I reached out to grab the bag from his shoulder, but was surprised to see him lean back with a look of determination. I raised a brow in question. Let me help. I don't need your help. I seemed. This time, I reached out and yanked my bag off No's shoulder rather forcefully, watching as his eyes wide and at my sudden show of aggressiveness. I can take responsibility of my own bag. When I turned to walk the other way, I did a double take as I came to notice that both Xavier and Ariel were standing by, watching her action with questioning gazes. Forcing on a tight smile, I left through the door and made my way to the car, all the while thinking this will be one hell of a flight back. The familiar scent of my home hit me right in the deepest part of my heart and clenched tightly around the bundle of muscle as soon as we walked through the wooden door. I twisted the key in the lock and pulled it out, stepping further inside as Ariel walked in behind me and then Xavier shut the door. We had taken the flight back to our hometown in Illinois, Xavier joining along to help me pack and keep me company. And although a part of me was very ecstatic to go back to my apartment and home, another part of me was dreading the moment it'd have to walk away. I had an odd habit of forming unbreakable bonds with routines once I'd gotten used to something. It's very difficult to let go. Even though it's only been a couple years since I'd moved to this part of town and the apartment I was currently staying in, I held the place so close to my heart that it instantly became my home, a place I could never imagine walking away from. Nora, Xavier called out to me, snapping me out of the jumble of doubts my thoughts had created in my mind. I looked over at him to see him standing beside the bookshelf set by the TV in my living room, his eyes watching me expectantly as if waiting for a reply to an unheard question. Sorry. What? I asked if you'd like me to pack up these framed pictures. Oh yes, please. I raised a finger to ask for a moment, then rushed over to my bedroom down the hall, reaching my closet and rummaging through the back for any bags I had left. I re-entered the living room with a gym bag which I offered to Xavier. If it's important, it'll stand out. I informed him as his eyes searched among the room for anything to pack up. I gave him a small smile in appreciation before turning back to my bedroom. I searched once more in the back of my closet and returned with a bunch of old backpacks. Then I began with the basic necessities that I hadn't already packed up the last time I fled to Indiana. Some clothes. I only grabbed my favorites, knowing I'd be able to make up for the rest once we settle at our new place. No doubt a day, and an Ariel would already be dragging us to the city for some major shopping. As I rummaged through my closet, I came across an old shoe box hidden in the corner, packed with faded Polaroids, torn tickets, and random notes from some of my favorite times in high school and college. I smiled involuntarily as I went through some of the pictures, seeing the smiling faces of people I'd nearly forgotten existed. The sudden knocking on my wooden door snapped me out of my haze, and I looked over across my bed to see Ariel popping her head through the door. Hey you, I'm done packing up. Would you like some help? She exclaimed cheerfully. I frowned. How? I stuttered, confused. Ariel, we literally arrived not 15 minutes ago. Yeah, and? She questioned, equally as confused. Did you seriously manage to pack up all of your last couple of years within 15 minutes? Only, I asked in disbelief. She scoffed. I'm starting fresh. Nora, I don't need to carry my past into my future. I rolled my eyes. Deep. Ariel. Deep. I sighed, looking around at the slight mess I've created on my bedroom floor. I actually don't have much left to pack, so I'm good. Thanks. I was met with a wide smile in return. Then I'll go downtown to grab us some coffee. The usual. I hummed in response, and she left to go ask Xavier for his order. Once I heard the front door be slammed shut as Ariel left, I stuffed all my memories back into the box and gently placed it inside a wide bag, packing it up along with the rest of my necessities. Unlike Ariel, I could never leave my past behind. I should always carry it into my future. It's a part of who I am. My bedroom door creaked as it was gently pushed open. Xavier stepping inside, his eyes falling to my cross-legged seating on the carpeted floor. He gave me a warm smile, pointing over at my bed with a questioning gaze. May I? I staggered at his question, not expecting the politeness. Of course. Upon my permission, he walked in and sat at the edge of my bed, his gaze falling to me on the floor. I finished packing up the living room, but you should take another look around in case I missed anything important. I shifted in my seat to face him, smiling appreciatively. Thank you. His silver gaze shimmered under my bedroom's fluorescent lights, his eyes studying mine for a few seconds too long. Always, he replied sincerely, and my heart fluttered. I felt a warm blush creeping up my cheeks, and I broke contact with his intense gaze as I went back to the mission at hand. I'm only packing up the irreplaceable pictures and memories and all, I informed him. He hummed in response, his eyes studying my motions as I shifted on my seat and began standing up. I moved towards my dresser, pulling the drawers and sneaking quick glances inside. Will you keep your apartment? Xavier asked me after a few moments of comfortable silence. I exhaled a breath, thinking over the decision I'd made earlier during our flight. If I were to pay rent for the new place Ariel and I are thinking of moving to, there's no way I could also keep this one. I'm already running on a tight budget. No, I can't afford to pay your rents. I glanced over to gauge his reaction, and I found a slight frown creeping up his features. Xavier's confused silver gaze stared at me, as the wheels continued to turn in the back of his mind. I thought you were moving into our home. I took a sharp intake of breath, his words tightening my stomach. I shouldn't have been surprised that Xavier expected me to move in, after everything that's happened between us, but for some reason the thought hadn't crossed my mind. When I cowed for any proper response to his invitation, Xavier spoke up once again, the words rolling off his tongue slowly as he emphasized every word. Your hour. He hesitated for a second, then continued. My Luna, Nora, I want you to move into our home, and be beside me. My heart clenched and unclenched tightly in my chest. I feared I might have a heart attack. Was I ready to do that? I had come to accept, and even believe, that Xavier and I might actually be soulmates. The stories he spoke to me of went hand in hand with the indescribable feelings that were harbored in my chest, and I couldn't make any other sense of it. And after everything that we had gone through, a voice deep within my heart spoke in loud volumes that I would, in fact, go above and beyond for him and his pack. His pack, our pack, fought to come and rescue me when I needed them the most. They didn't hesitate 1 second when they had to risk their own lives in order to save mine, in order to avenge me and the pain and suffering that was induced by Darius and his men, all while I was still a stranger to them. If that didn't speak volumes of the length they were willing to go to in order to protect me, and how much they cared for me, I don't know what will. And even though I still felt like a stranger to them, somehow, they had already found a place in the deepest parts of my heart. They are my new family, and I know that I would fight for them with just the same amount of ferocity as their undying loyalty to their home, Alpha, and now their Luna. My thoughts were interrupted when loud, impatient knocks came from down the hall. Eyes shifting to the front door, I excused myself from Xavier's watchful gaze and headed down the hall towards the front door. Ariel stood on the other side of the door with a frown on her face, balancing a tray with 2 drinks in one hand while sipping from her own drink in her other. "Where have you been?" "I've been knocking for nearly an hour." I rolled my eyes at her exaggeration and stepped to the side to allow her in. "How far in are you?" "With the packing and all." She spoke in rushed sentences. "Once inside my apartment." Ariel twirled to look at me with gleaming eyes. Her excitement was so prominent on her features that it could be noted from a block away. "I'd say halfway." I shrugged, not entirely sure with my answer. If I accepted Xavier's offer of moving into his family home, and was free of paying rent for the new place he'll be staying at, I might actually keep this apartment. And if so, then I wouldn't really need to pack everything up. But that's only if. Ariel let out an annoyed groan. "I thought you'd be done by now. We need to take the earliest flight back so we can go furniture shopping." My eyes widened. I had sick visions while waiting in line. I'm thinking contemporary, maybe even try out the minimalist lifestyle. Her eyes gazed far off into the distance as she got lost in her own fantasy, imagining all the different ways she could start off her new life. I snorted. "You, a minimalist?" The noise snapped her back to reality, and her eyes found mine before narrowing dangerously into tight slits. "Ariel." Xavier's voice came from down the hall, greeting her in surprise. "You're back early." Ariel flicked her wrist nonchalantly. "Short line. Anyway, we need to help this." She pointed at me. "Finish packing up or else shall take forever." She went over to give him his drink, mumbling something about an energy boost. Xavier frowned as he came to a stop beside us, watching her curiously. "And you finished your own packing?" "Already." "Apparently." I spoke up before Ariel could. "She's all about that fresh start. I only packed what I needed, everything else is replaceable." She shrugged. Xavier hummed in response. Then his vision shifted to me. "How about a lunch break? We can go to one of your favorite restaurants in the city. One last time before the big move." Ariel gasped, her hand coming up to clutch my upper arm in excitement. I glanced at her to see her beaming, bearing a wide smile, and instantly I knew what she was thinking of. "Yeah," I agreed. "We can go to our favorite place. It's a small diner a few blocks away." I glanced over at Xavier and he offered me a warm smile, nodding in approval. I turned to head back to my room. "I'll just grab my purse," I announced. When I walked back out, Xavier stood alone in my living room, waiting patiently as he leaned back against the kitchen counter. He stood upright and gave me a small smile. "Where's Ariel?" She stepped outside for a phone call. I nodded, continuing my steps towards the front door. I was surprised when Xavier suddenly reached out and gently got a hold of my hand, halting me in my tracks. I shifted and my confused eyes found his. He slowly began inching closer to me until he stood a mere foot away, the heat radiating off his chest, spreading a comforting warmth down the length of my arms. My senses were overtaken by his close proximity, his addictive aroma, and the millions of sparks that traveled from his fingertips up my own hand, igniting a sensation that only he could ever make me feel. My heart began to beat loudly in my chest. "You never gave me an answer." A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips, his hypnotizing silver eyes glinting. His long fingers continued to gently rub soothing circles on the back of my hand as my mind raced with questions. I could only whisper back dumbly. Xavier's smile widened, flashing me his white pearls. I blinked and was suddenly pulled out of whatever trance his intimate actions had pulled me into. I forced my feet one step away from his close proximity, letting the air wash the tension growing between us. His question finally made sense. He was referring to our earlier conversation in the room, where he asked me to move into his family home. I don't know. I stuttered a response, unable to hide my doubts and hesitation. A brief flash of disappointment washed through Xavier's eyes, his eyebrows slightly coming down into a small frown. He inhaled deeply, fixing his grip on my hand. I realized things might be moving a little too fast. he began to say, but as I've told you before, Nora, you are my soulmate, and my Luna. From the moment I laid eyes upon you, I was ready to start my life with you. My heart sunk deep into my stomach. But if you need time, then you can have as much as you want. His lips curved up into a promising smile. I'm not going anywhere unless you order me to. My eyes had begun to sting by the time Xavier finished speaking, his kind words stirring deep emotions within my heart. I couldn't believe that I had been blessed with a man like him. Involuntarily, my hand pulled away from his, only to slowly curl around his wide torso. I only saw a second of the surprise that flashed through Xavier's eyes, before my feet inched closer to him and my face came flat against his chest. I embraced him with a newfound confidence, my entire body engulfed with warmth and his addictive mahogany antique, with scent that traveled to my stomach and clenched the muscles tightly. His chest had suddenly stopped moving as his breathing halted, taken over by surprise from my unexpected response to his considerate words. His arms then moved from being still by his sides to slowly wrap around my shoulders, his fingertips leading trails of sparks over my skin as he wrapped me in his arms. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I felt complete, within Xavier's arms, engulfed by his familiar scent and warmth. I felt right at home, beside my soulmate. And suddenly I was struck by the fact that it no longer mattered to me where in the world I was, how far I had to travel and what I had to leave behind, as long as it'd be with the person who made me feel whole. Is that a yes? His amused voice whispered lowly, his lips moving against my hair. I shook my head at his persistence while letting out a heartfelt chuckle, my arms tightening around his torso as I found comfort in the arms of my mate. And all the while, an inner voice chanted one word in the back of my mind, maybe.